Hello and welcome to episode 47 of the official EstablishRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR, and as I am each and every week this offseason, I am joined by the legend himself, the Lord of the Top 150, fellow ETR co-founder, the life of the NFL Combine festivities. It is Evan Silva. Evan, what's going on? Welcome home.
Yeah, what's up, man? Had a great time in Indianapolis. Came away with some nuggets that I hope will help the audience, help ETR subscribers. Got to meet with some pretty big time people in the media inside the NFL. Just put out top one, the earliest I've ever published a top 150. Taylor was on my ass about it. Finally got it out. I mean, it took me a long time. It took me like a longer time than anticipated because I'm trying to keep up with the XFL, and it's a long process. We talked about it last week, but finally got it out, and I think it's a pretty good one. And it's in terms of like the format of the top 150. This is the best that ever. You can go check it out at establishthерun.com, but I think it's the most visually pleasing format in which the top 150 has ever been produced.
Yeah. We're going to get to top 150 in a second. Did you chill with Sean Payton and reminisce about the time that he called Alvin Kamara soft?
No, did not see Sean Payton in Indianapolis this year.
Okay, as Evan mentioned, on the site right now, of course, we have XFL. We're grinding. It's about mid-season. We're grinding hard in the XFL. We're entering week 5. Free agency rankings and the free agency tracker are up. Free agency is approaching quickly. It'll start, I believe, next week or in 2 weeks. Pat Kerrane's dynasty rankings, which are super, I think, interesting and detailed and thoughtful. Pat has contract status up there and age and all his detailed thoughts on guys like, he has lower than market on Terry McLaurin and stuff like that. And you can click on the plus sign and find the notes for why. And then as of today, March 3rd, Evan's top 150, his first look at the top 150 fantasy football players for the 2020 season was posted. It is free. So just like this podcast, for now, you guys can go on there and check it out and see what Evan's initial thoughts are. Obviously, we have a long way to go with the NFL draft, with free agency, with the offseason, preseason, depth chart battles, et cetera, et cetera. But for now, you can see what he thinks for the top 150 in the 2020 season. On last week's show, we talked about his top 5s at each position. So you can go back and listen to that. Okay. As we emerge from the combine here, I do want to get into some of the prospects. I do want to get into some workout measurables that we think are worth discussing. But one thing about the NFL combine is that a lot of rumors fly, I think, for the reasons that Evan said. NFL decision makers are in Indy and the media is in Indy and they're all lubed up on alcohol and Lord knows what's going on and everybody's talking and relaxed and hanging out. So I think that even more interesting than what happened at the workouts is some of these rumors or some of these reports that happen with veteran players. So I want to talk about a few of these. I think we'll do 5 or 6 of these, and then we'll get into some of the workout stuff that we saw that we thought stood out from the college level. The first one that kind of surprised me is that the Bengals, reportedly, if they can't get a long-term deal done with AJ Green by next week, they plan to place the franchise tag on AJ Green. That is $18.6 million, roughly, for the wide receiver franchise tag. Now, AJ Green, Evan, will be 32 in July. He's only been able to play 10 games in 2016, 9 games in 2018, and 0 in 2019. I mean, somewhat chronic, I think, foot and ankle issues for AJ Green. Were you surprised about the report that the Bengals are going to place the franchise tag on him?
I guess not that surprised, just because the Bengals are so stubborn. They didn't even try to trade him last year when they had the opportunity before the trade deadline. There were a lot of rumblings throughout last year that AJ Green's injury shouldn't have cost him the entire season. And, especially as the Bengals piled up losses, his incentive to come back and play just completely dissipated. So I think that they're really going to have to convince AJ Green that they can put together a competitive team this year for him to play, regardless of whether they put the franchise tag on him. And you can definitely envision a scenario where AJ Green just, again, refuses to play for the Bengals ever again. And I think this situation could get ugly potentially.
Really? I see. I think he'd be insane to leave $18 million guaranteed on the table. You don't?
I think that he does not want to play for the Bengals. I
Yeah.
mean, you can go back and look at like Carson Palmer's. Carson Palmer like gave up a season in like toward the end of his prime, just so he did not have to play for, like, literally retired for a season to not play for the Bengals. AJ Green got hurt on this field. Initially got hurt on this field that they were playing. It was for some some anniversary thing, and it wasn't necessarily the Bengals' fault in theory, or at least the Bengals made sure to spin it that way. But it was like there were pebbles on the field, and like he got hurt on a very substandard field and just never came back.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that he has like legitimate beef with the organization, and I think that he's not. I think he doesn't want to play for them anymore.
Sure. What's somewhat funny to me is that a long-term deal with a 32-year-old player who's had so many injuries scares me, number one. And then I know we've talked about this already, and a lot of other people have talked about it, but I just wanted to say, if they can get A.J. Green to play, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, Auden Tate, we talked last week about getting Jonah Williams back. Like, in theory, the offense could be something that we have to be very, very aware of from a fantasy perspective. Let's move on to another Bengals-related topic. Reportedly, the Bears are talking to the Bengals about A.J. Dalton. A.J. Dalton has 1 year left on his contract at $17 million or so. Obviously, we expect Joe Burrow to be a Bengal, and the Bears would be interested in Dalton as competition for Mitch Trubisky. I'm curious who you'd rather have from a real-life perspective, Andy Dalton or Mitch Trubisky.
So there was a lot of discussion of this at the combine, and way back in January, I thought that the Bears might go after Marcus Mariota because of his Oregon connection to Mark Helfrich. Marcus Mariota is a free agent. He's only 26 years old. Mark Helfrich at the time was the Bears offensive coordinator, but the Bears fired Mark Helfrich and they hired Bill Lazor to replace him. And Bill Lazor spent 3 years as Andy Dalton's quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator in Cincinnati. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that they are going to give Mitchell Trubisky the start to begin the year. I think that he is going to be, and if they do acquire someone like Andy Dalton or Marcus Mariota, even, I think that Mitchell Trubisky is going to be on a relatively short leash. I think that Ryan Pace, the Bears GM, really wants Mitchell Trubisky to work. I mean, they traded up a lot to move up one spot in the draft to get him. That's his prize jewel draft pick. Ryan Pace was asked at the combine the strengths of Mitchell Trubisky, and the first two things he said were accuracy and processing. And those are actually Mitchell Trubisky's greatest weaknesses. So Ryan Pace is just in complete denial, trying to make this work, trying to force this. And I mean, I know for the fact from having lived in Chicago, and I know a fair number of people that cover the team. Matt Nagy is not sold by any stretch on Mitchell Trubisky, and I think that he is ultimately going to be the driving force behind someone that they bring in to compete with Mitchell Trubisky, whether that be Andy Dalton or someone else.
See, I think the median baseline, like Andy Dalton's average play, is actually better than Mitch Trubisky's. The reason that I would rather have Mitch Trubisky is at least there's some unknown that maybe he could improve. Maybe he could find his way to a ceiling. Whereas Andy Dalton's been in the league so long, we've seen him so many times. It's like we know what he is. He's just stone mediocre, right? But like on an average basis, I think Andy Dalton's better. Mitch Trubisky at least has a chance, I think, to find a higher ceiling than Andy Dalton. So if I was the Bears, I would agree that I would prefer to start Mitch. If I was just trying to win like 8 games this year or 9 games, I would probably prefer Andy Dalton. But
well, the Bears have an elite defense from a talent standpoint.
Sure,
they have Allen Robinson, who's a true number one. They've got Tariq Cohen. They've got a couple of pieces they can add to that. Andy Dalton, I think that Matt Nagy could see a lot of Alex Smith in him. The Chiefs had a lot of success winning games with Matt Nagy as their OC, with Alex Smith as their quarterback. And just a guy who's going to go in there and he's going to be able to get completions and not be such an errant passer that Mitchell Trubisky was, and throw so many like danger plays, just throwing the ball to the other team and hoping that they don't catch it. Yeah. Andy Dalton is just going to be a veteran who makes a lot of smart decisions, keeps the team in games, and they were just an anemic offense this past season. And I think that Andy Dalton could get them into the mediocrity. And if they have a top 16, 15 offense with a top 5 defense, I mean, you're talking about a team that, I think could win 9 or 10 games.
Yep. Let's talk about another anemic offense. I wasn't taking these Tom Brady rumors too seriously. I thought it was a lot of smoke, that of course he's going to go back to New England. But there were a lot of reports out of the combine. One specifically from Jeff Darlington said that Tom Brady will indeed hit free agency, and he's evaluating the landscape with the intention of departing. Tom Brady is 43 years old, 20 seasons in New England, obviously 6 Super Bowls. It's hard to envision him not playing for the Patriots, but I'm sure there's other teams that want him, particularly teams that want to sell tickets. I'm thinking LA Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, maybe Chargers, I don't know, Bucks, I don't know. But I'd still be somewhat surprised, despite all the reports, I'd still be somewhat surprised if he didn't come back to New England. I'm curious if you caught any buzz in Indy about what's going on with Tom Brady.
Yeah, the talk in Indy was that the Titans are really serious about making a run at him. Mike Vrabel, their head coach, FaceTiming with Tom Brady and Julian Edelman at the basketball game sort of toward the end of the combine timeline, kind of added fuel to that fire. Mm-hmm. I still think that there's a decent chance that Brady goes back to New England. But if he were to leave, then it sounds like the Titans are the favorites to get him. There are just a lot of ties to Tom Brady in the Titans organization. John Robinson, their GM, came up in the Patriots organization. And, of course, Mike Vrabel played with Tom Brady in New England.
Yeah. There was a report from, I think it was Rob Domofsky, who covers the Green Bay Packers. And he made, and at least the Packers are aware of it, that they need more pass catchers. They reportedly plan to add 2 of them via free agency and the draft. And you can certainly get a bunch. But I'm not sure that the guy that he talked about, he said they're planning to target Austin Hooper. I'm not sure that's what Aaron Rodgers really needs. I would rather see somebody more explosive. I don't know what you think about that, but they're expected to release Jimmy Graham, who's just a disaster signing for them. I would note that Matt LaFleur was the Falcons' quarterbacks coach when Austin Hooper was a rookie in 2016 in Atlanta. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure Austin Hooper is exactly what fixes what's wrong with Green Bay right now, which is clearly what's wrong with Green Bay is that Aaron Rodgers only feels comfortable throwing to Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Austin Hooper would be a fine signing. He would give the Packers a solid possession tight end, just really reliable, almost 80% career catch rate. He could block enough. From a dynasty standpoint, he would block Jay Sternberger, who they drafted in the 3rd round this past year. And I mean, I really liked him coming out of Texas A&M. But he would be a big roadblock in the way of Jay Sternberger. I'm completely with you, though, in theory. I mean, I think that they should sign 2 guys. I mean, I think that having Allen Lazard as your number 2 option in the passing game isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that even if they do sign someone like Austin Hooper, I think they should go after Robbie Anderson. I think that Robbie Anderson opposite Devontae Adams would give them just a completely different dynamic in their passing game. I think that they need I think that they need an explosive field stretcher. And yeah, if I was them, I would focus on a guy like Robbie Anderson. I mean, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, in theory had the skill set to be that guy, but he just did not take a second-year leap.
Yeah. There were some reports, I think it was from our friend Matthew Berry had noted that Aaron Rodgers really likes Allen Lazard. The staff really likes Allen Lazard. So I think they're going to add a wide receiver for sure. But for now, I would consider Allen Lazard the front runner for the number 2 wide receiver job, assuming they don't add anybody, which they almost certainly will. Speaking of the report from Matthew Berry, who had a lot of good stuff in his article about stuff he heard at the Combine, he wrote that an inside source says the Giants don't believe Evan Engram can ever stay healthy. The source believes Evan Engram is a candidate to be traded during the upcoming season. Now that would shock me, considering Evan Ingram's ceiling and what he's shown when he's been on the field. I understand he's had a hard time staying healthy. There's a lot of guys in the NFL who were injury prone until they weren't. I would not be willing to give up Evan Engram very easily if I were the Giants. Then again, one of the biggest donkeys in the entire league, Dave Gettleman, is making the decisions for the New York Giants. So this one surprised me, man. I don't know if you heard anything like that while you were out there, but I know you like Evan Engram. I like Evan Engram too. And for Daniel Jones' sake, I hope they do keep him.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Engram is a guy who has, been in the league for just a few years. He's still only 24 years old. I mean, he's not a guy to bet against, I don't think. I love this tweet that Pat Thorman had in response to that nugget from Matthew Berry. Which well-run organization will take advantage of this short-sighted correlation causation failure and relieve the Giants of a valuable asset? I think that's perfect, and I think that that's right. If Matthew Berry, assuming that Matthew Berry's inside source is correct, that the Giants are open to trading Evan Engram, which I think would be, I think that would be a big, big mistake. I mean, I think that first of all, he's cheap. You've developed a really young, strong core around your, at least skill possession core around your second-year quarterback, and you want to put as many weapons as you possibly can around that second-year quarterback. And Evan Engram, I think, is a really big part of that.
One of the biggest talking points I feel like coming out of the combine was Phillip Rivers, which I don't really care. I think Phillip Rivers at this point is just whatever. Like, I'm not that interested in where Phillip Rivers goes, but people are like falling all over themselves to link Phillip Rivers to the Colts and whoever else. What'd you hear about Phillip Rivers while you're out there, and do you care?
Super, super strong buzz about him going to the Colts. And Matthew Berry wrote in his piece, essentially that he believes the opposite will happen. Right. And I was talking with Warren Sharp and Josh Hermsmeyer and Ian Greengross, who's an NFL agent, over dinner on Thursday night about this. And, I think that what makes the most sense for the Colts is for them to draft a quarterback. And because what you really want to do to give yourself a competitive advantage in the NFL, the single biggest competitive advantage is to get a quarterback on his rookie deal and have that luxury for 4 to 5 years. Jacoby Brissett is probably not the answer. I think he's definitely not the answer. But you can kind of use him as your bridge, draft a guy like Jordan Love out of Utah State, and you can play him quickly, I think. I think you've got enough pieces in place, especially with the offensive line. You're bringing back – I think they're bringing back every single starter because Anthony Costanzo, who's a free agent, sounds like he's definitely coming back. They're bringing back all 5 starters from one of the best offensive lines in football. You have T.Y. Hilton coming back. You got Paris Campbell. Zach Pascal took a really, really big step this past year. And you have the second most salary cap space in the NFL to continue to add around your new young quarterback. But what you want to do is you want to get to that position where you have 4 years of a cheap quarterback, and then on that 5th year he's still affordable. And that's the position that you want to get to. You don't necessarily want to commit to Phillip Rivers for the next 2 years, especially when you already have Jacoby Brissett on your roster at $18 million or whatever he's making.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and Chris Ballard made the point that the Colts were 5-2 with Jacoby Brissett, and then injuries struck, and yada yada yada. I don't think they're ever winning a Super Bowl with Jacoby Brissett, but I'm not sure that I don't think they're winning a Super Bowl with Phillip Rivers either. So, agree with you there. Last one is more just because I want to talk about Donald Parham. Dallas will reportedly part ways with Jason Witten. If Dallas is smart and watching the XFL, they will give Donald Parham a shot. Obviously, I'm half joking, but Donald Parham has been I think anybody who's watched thinks that Donald Parham is the best NFL prospect currently among skilled players. 6'8", ran 22 miles an hour on a long touchdown run a couple weeks ago, dominating. Dallas does have Blake Jarwin, who I know you tweeted about. But what do you think about Dallas moving on from Jason Witten? Blake Jarwin could be interesting, and I'm mostly joking about Donald Parham, but I hope Dallas or somebody gives him a chance.
He reminds me of Ladarius Green. Remember Ladarius Green?
Well, who are you talking about, Parham or Blake Jarwin?
No, Parham. You're joking, right?
Yeah.
Parham, real tall, long, lanky, explosive. And I don't know, the Redskins had Donald Parham last year. I don't know why they just cut ties with him almost immediately. But, I think that he's probably the best NFL prospect in the XFL. But I would not sleep on Blake Jarwin. The Cowboys are going to give him a second-round tender. That shows that they value him as a restricted free agent. That's going to be about $3.5 million this year. He was 7th among 40 qualified tight ends in yards per route run last year. He was 6th among 35 qualified tight ends in yards per target. He's not a very good blocker. So it's going to take a little bit, and neither is Donald Parham. So it's going to take a little bit of a change in their offensive philosophy. And of course they changed coaching staffs or they tweaked their coaching staff because their OC Kellen Moore is coming back. But they're going to have to change some of their thought processes as to how they allocate playing time at the tight end position, because they, for years and years, have valued a blocking tight end and use guys like Blake Jarwin as, as just situational players who can add a little bit on passing downs, sporadically.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to get to some of the workout notes, but give some people some context or some notes, general takeaways from the combine. A lot of people are never going to get to go to the combine. What's it like? What were your general takeaways from this year's combine?
Yeah, so I was there for 2 nights, 1 day. So I wasn't there for very long. The first night, went out for a steak dinner with Sharp, with Hermsmeyer, Ian Greengross, an agent who represents Damian Williams, who, of course, should have been the Super Bowl MVP. The Sports Info Solutions guys were there, who we worked with a little bit this past year. Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders, Eric Eager of Pro Football Focus, Steve Belichick, Field Yates of ESPN, who, by the way, knows everyone. He was like hanging out with Steve Belichick. He brought Steve Belichick out. The first thing that I asked Steve Belichick was, "Where's Brady going?" And he looked at me like, "I don't know, man." And he was just kind of like, F you. And then I didn't say another word to him. So, that didn't go real well. But, just everybody's, talking to each other. I mentioned that the big buzz was about Phillip Rivers to the Colts. I think that there's a high probability of that, being a realistic, even though I don't think it necessarily makes sense. And it doesn't necessarily align with what Chris Ballard, that's just all the discussion of that makes you think that that's still very much on the table. Another big nugget was that Jordan Love, who I mentioned earlier, the quarterback from Utah State, is going to go higher than everyone thinks. There was a lot of CBA talk. People probably listening to this don't care about that as much. It's not that interesting, but it's a really big deal for the NFL. And that kind of dominated the discussion. Like last year, no one was talking about that because there weren't CBA discussions, but this year that kind of dominated the discussion. There were rumblings of the Panthers tanking like the Browns and the Dolphins did. I know that Matt Rule, the new Panthers coach, came out and said that they are bringing back Cam Newton. But, man, I got really skeptical of that when I was in Indy. Right now, Cam just can't pass a physical. So they have to say that he's going to be part of the Panthers. So Matt Rule's his back is kind of against the wall. But if you look at their moves, they're not going to try to retain James Bradbury. They're shopping Trey Turner. I think that, everybody except for maybe their young wide receivers could be, potentially on the trade block. I'm not sure about Christian McCaffrey. I think that discussion becomes interesting because if they're not going to be competitive this year, and this will be his 4th year, and then he gets expensive in his 5th year, and so you're getting another year. You're just wasting another year of his career, and he's going to have like some, 1,400 touches on his, on his resume by then after this upcoming season. So do they try to shop Christian McCaffrey? I think that becomes interesting. The Cowboys are definitely not going to let Dak Prescott go. The Bengals are definitely taking Joe Burrow. Hunter Henry, I think, is definitely getting the franchise tag. David Njoku, who really fell out of favor last year under John Dorsey and Freddie Kitchens, he's going to get a clean slate under Kevin Stefanski and their new GM, Andrew Berry. So those were kind of the main takeaways that I had from being there for about 2 days.
Nice. Sounds like fun. I've never actually been. I hope to go one day, although I feel like everybody there can drink like 10x the amount that I can drink. So I don't know how long I would be awake. I do want to talk about some rookies though, man. It's crazy. Like I feel like there's so much going on at the combine, and like the rookies are almost like in the background. But I still find the athletic testing fascinating. And I get it that like just because a wide receiver can run in a straight line out of a track stance really fast doesn't mean that he's going to be good. But typically, great players are great athletes. Doesn't mean that a great athlete will definitely be a great player, but typically great players are great athletes. So I just want to run through some of the running back and wide receiver testing, some things that stuck out to me. We'll have much more on this rookie class as we get closer to the draft. Evan will have his dynasty rookie rankings, and I'm sure Pat will. as well. And we'll be talking all about that and how they fit into redraft and everything. But for now, I just want to talk about some of these measurables. The first one that everybody's talking about is Jonathan Taylor, the running back from Wisconsin, who was wildly productive at Wisconsin, almost 2,000 yards in all three of his seasons at Wisconsin, averaged 6.7 yards per carry while getting 926 carries. Just absurd. So he measured in at 5'10", 226, which is like ideal size, 4'3", 40, and he had good jumping measurables, 36-inch vertical, 123-inch broad jump. There's still a lot of mock drafts and whatnot that have DeAndre Swift going ahead of Jonathan Taylor. I'm curious what you think of Jonathan Taylor and if you think he's moved ahead of Swift with this performance at the combine.
Yeah, so I'm very, very much still very early in my my draft prospect research. I'm going to end up watching all the guys, and I'm a little bit more ahead with regard to running backs right now, and wide receivers. I'm just kind of I really haven't dove into them at all. Like if you read the top 150, I have actual kind of stances on the running backs, but with the wide receivers, I just grabbed. I looked at Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. He's the best mock drafter in mainstream, like the big media, the big draft media. Just grabbed all 6 of the wide receivers that he had projected in the first round and just bunched them right together in like the 120s in the top 150. And as I learn more about those guys, I'll start to separate them. And of course, when they join teams, we'll try to prognosticate how they're going to do with their new teams. But I'm a little bit more ahead with my running back research. I think that Jonathan Taylor right now should be pretty close to the consensus 1.01 pick in dynasty drafts. I put him around RB12 overall in the new top 150. So that's really an aggressive ranking. But then you start to look at the running backs that are behind him, and it's like Melvin Gordon, and his situation is kind of nebulous, and Le'Veon Bell, even his situation is kind of nebulous. But I love the combination of athleticism and production. When those two things come together, your probability soars of hitting on a prospect, whether it doesn't matter what position it is at. If the guy is a really good athlete and he was hyper productive in college, that's such a good starting point. Jonathan Taylor averaged over 2,000 rushing yards per season at Wisconsin. He caught a bunch of balls this past season. That's often been a knock on Wisconsin RBs. A lot of the Wisconsin RBs, and this is going to be held against them during the draft process, believe me, just the fact that he played at Wisconsin. But a lot of those past Wisconsin RBs were not as good of athletes as he is, whether it be Monty Ball or Ron Dane. So, he is not a limited athlete like a lot of those guys. I mean, he's even a better athlete than Melvin Gordon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just an outrageous speed score. He's a former track athlete. So I think that he's a really, really high probability prospect.
Yeah. By the way, when Evan said 1.01, he meant 1.01 in dynasty rookie drafts, not 1.01 overall. And by the way, Pat Crane will be adding rookies to his dynasty rankings soon as we approach the draft. We did get a question from Kentucky Buckeye. He wants to know about Cam Akers. He says, any chance Cam Akers leaps Swift and Dobbins? I think Akers has every bit the chance to be just as good, if not better, than those two. Cam Akers, of course, Florida State, very productive in both the run and the pass game. He measured 5'10", 217, 4.47 speed, solid 20 bench press reps, good explosive testing. But yeah, what do you think about Cam Akers? Any chance he can get past Swift and Dobbins?
He is an interesting guy that I have not looked at yet. His speed score and his number of catches stood out to me, but he had a lot of drops. And I don't know. He's a guy that I need to study more. Right now, I did put him in the top 150 though, and he is. I think he's. I don't know. He's somewhere in the 100s. I think that he projects as right now, just based on my limited knowledge, projects as like the lead back in a committee.
Second guy I want to mention is Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU. And I mean, this dude measured in at 5'7". Like he's short, but he is 207 pounds. But when you're 5'7", you only run a 4.6. It's a little bit worrisome, I think. And also, I don't know what you think about LSU guys, but it was almost hard not to be productive for LSU last year. And I'm not saying these guys aren't talented and they're not going to be good NFL players, but all these guys put up huge numbers for LSU. So what do you think of Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Again, 5'7", 207, ran a 4.6.
Yeah, I like him, and I don't care about how tall a running back is. I actually like it when they're shorter because, I mean, they're harder to see between the tackles. Like, I think that can be a real thing behind the offensive linemen. They have a little bit of an advantage setting up their blocks. 4.6 flat at 207 is fine. He had a 39.5-inch vertical. I mean, he's a good athlete, over 10-foot broad jump. He returned kicks for 3 years at LSU. You know, we talk a lot about how a little bit of an edge when it comes to prognosticating skill position players is if they played in the return game, if they were good in the return game. He was at LSU. He's one of the best receiving backs in the draft. So I'm not bumping him down at all. I don't know. It's possible that the fact that he is 5'7" and the NFL has, you know, certain biases and he ran 4.6, maybe he won't be a second round pick and now he'll be a third round pick. But I think at that point he would become a value pick. And yeah, he's a guy that I'm looking at to make a rookie impact.
Last running back I want to mention is A.J. Dillon out of Boston College, because after this combine, people are like making Derrick Henry comparisons. And we know how much Evan loves the big dog, Derrick Henry. A.J. Dillon measured 6 foot flat, 247, ran a 4.53 at that size, 41-inch vertical at that size is outrageous. Now, he caught just 21 balls across 3 seasons as the feature back for Boston College. Do you see any Derrick Henry in A.J. Dillon, and what do you think of him?
I don't know. I mean, making comparisons to Derrick Henry, you know, you got to be really, really good. A.J. Dillon did score 40 touchdowns in 35 career games at Boston College. He only had 21 catches in his college career, similar to Derrick Henry. Actually, I think Derrick Henry had even fewer than that. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned just a complete freak. Derrick Henry he ran 4.53. No, A.J. Dillon ran 4.53 at 247. Derrick Henry also weighed in at 247, ran 4.54. So on paper, they look like very, very similar. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the NFL evaluates A.J. Dillon. Derrick Henry went in the second round. That's low for, you know, a guy that played on such a high stage and was so dominant at Alabama. And A.J. Dillon played at Boston College. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the NFL evaluates him. I think that the NFL has a little bit, like, there comes a point where they have an anti or like a size bias at running back, and they don't want their running backs to be too big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I was building a team, I mean, it would be a absolute prerequisite for my running back to play well in the pass game. Like in today's NFL, if my running back, like, I understand Derrick Henry is awesome. It's just, you're so narrow in the ways you can win when Derrick Henry is your whole team and your whole system is built around him. So to me, I would bump down anybody who I didn't think would play really well in the pass game. But, you know, I'm just sitting here in my basement and those guys are making decisions. Let's talk about some wide receivers. We can run through these quicker because Evan has not studied all these guys yet. But Henry Ruggs stole the headlines. Henry Ruggs only, you know, caught 40 balls last year as a junior for Alabama. He's only 5'11", 188, which whatever, that doesn't bother me. He ran a 4.27, which is one of the fastest ever. And I actually retweeted, somebody like put together his high school basketball highlights, which are just outrageous. He had a 42-inch vertical, which is absurd. I thought one of the things coming out of the combine was people were like saying it's a bad thing that Henry Ruggs ran a 4.27, you know, and they point to John Ross and Marquise Goodwin and Darius Hayward-Bay, right? And they cherry pick all these guys that are fast who went high in drafts and didn't work out. And I get that. And there's more to a prospect than just his 40 time, but I don't think 4.27 is ever going to be a bad thing. So I'm intrigued by Henry Ruggs. I'm curious what you think of him and his speed.
Well, I think that I think the speed just speaks for itself, you know, and I think that the fact that Tyreek Hill has had so much success bodes positively for Henry Ruggs. I think that the interesting thing about Henry Ruggs that he played in this passing game that had so many other studs. You know, he was definitely not the number one. You know, if anybody was the number one, it was Jerry Jeudy. And so he's like, from a market share standpoint, and that's very big in the analytics community, and it's been, you know, it's been very, very successful. But in these deep passing games, you know, he gets docked for not having a big time market share. So you have to kind of adjust for his situation. And there, I think the guys at some guys at LSU are going to be similar. There were so many guys, and there were so many guys that they could get the ball to, and beyond Justin Jefferson, no one guy dominated the market share, which again has been a very effective tool for wide receiver predictions, but in these really deep passing games might not be as relevant.
I want to bring up a guy from, for you guys that don't know, Evan is a Notre Dame homer. Chase Claypool started all 4 years, I believe, for Notre Dame. Caught 13 touchdowns as a senior in 2019. I saw you tweeted and compared him to Vincent Jackson. Chase Claypool, 6'4", 238, 4.42 speed. Really good vertical. I mean, looks like, from a measurables perspective, as you noted, Vincent Jackson. What do you think of your boy from Notre Dame?
Well, this is a guy who I've seen play quite a bit, and I mean, I've seen Henry Ruggs and I've seen Jerry Jeudy and I've seen Justin Jefferson, but in terms of like sitting down and watching like repeated their plays over and over for like 5 or 6 games, I have not done that yet with those guys, and I'll do that eventually. But with Chase Claypool, it was interesting because at the start of the week, everybody was saying, oh, he's got to move to tight end. He's got to move to tight end. This guy goes out and he tests exactly like Vincent Jackson. He played mostly outside at Notre Dame. He had 16 catches of 20-plus yards this past season, the most of any wide receiver in this year's draft class. Watch his bowl game against Iowa State. If you come away, watching that game and thinking that this guy should be anything other than a wide receiver, I would be very, very surprised. So I don't know, that I think that this guy's going to be playing wide receiver in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a big outside receiver who doesn't necessarily, separate on a consistent basis, but absolutely has the size and the leaping ability and the physicality. This guy was like a stud punt gunner for Notre Dame. He was an incredible blocker as well. I think that the kind of negative takes on him started at the Senior Bowl because he didn't have this great Senior Bowl or something. I mean, people put a lot of stock into the Senior Bowl. I think that you watch his bowl game against Iowa State. I mean, you're seeing him play in an actual game, snap after snap, and he looks like Vincent Jackson.
Last wide receiver we're going to do, you mentioned Justin Jefferson earlier. Justin Jefferson had 110 catches for 1,540 yards and 18 touchdowns in 15 games for LSU last year. Where I thought when he moved to the slot, as this past year, is when he really took off. And there was a lot of talk about how fast he would run. He said he really practiced and really tried really hard to run a fast time. He measured 6'1", 202, ran a 4.43. People are going to say he doesn't play that fast. That's just his track time, whatever. Justin Jefferson, I think, helped himself at the combine. Do you have any takes on Justin Jefferson out of LSU yet?
Just that he checks like every single box.
Yeah.
Elite production, 18 touchdowns last year, as you mentioned, 4.43, 37.5-inch vertical, 10.6 broad jump, 6'1", 202, long arms, 33 inches. Fran Duffy, who does tape analysis for the Philadelphia Eagles and other platforms and is just an excellent analyst, learned from Greg Cosell. He really praised Justin Jefferson as a route runner, as an elite route runner. And yeah, I think that he's got, one of the highest floors in this wide receiver class. He's going to be a plus starter in the NFL. I think that he's a safe pick.
Before we wrap up here, we did get 2 listener questions I want to hit on. The first one comes from Wicked Puna. He says, in a draft so full of talented wide receivers, would you rather have your favorite team use their first rounder on a great prospect or wait a round or two and take advantage of the depth in this class? And I think it's an interesting question because this class is so deep at the wide receiver position. If this was the NBA, I would say you still need a top 3 pick. Like it's so obvious in basketball, one player, the great players, and then a bunch of scrubs around them can typically win. In the NFL, I don't know. I think it's a different question. So yeah, what do you think about his question? Would you rather take a wide receiver at the top of this class or wait and take advantage of the depth and take a couple later?
I think it's a great question, and I think it is so team specific that it is really difficult to answer. If you need a quarterback, you're taking the freaking quarterback. I think that let's just limit it to the wide receiver class because Daniel Jeremiah said he graded 24 27 wide receivers as being worthy of being drafted in the top 3 rounds. 27 wide receivers.
It's crazy.
That is insane. So I think that, in this specific year, I think that, especially if you need a quarterback or, a stud corner falls to you, or, a stud pass rusher, interior or exterior pass rusher. If a guy like that, just falls to you, or you need a tackle, an offensive tackle. I mean, I think that you definitely lean towards the depth in a situation like this with so many stud wide receivers available in this draft.
I mean, one of the things that we talk about in fantasy football is thinking about drafting in tiers, right? Like if a guy is going in the first round, but he's in the same tier as a guy who's going to go in the middle of the second round, then obviously you're better off waiting. So yeah, I'm sure that teams, just like we do in fantasy football, I'm sure sharp teams have tiers of wide receivers in this class also. All right, last question we're going to do before we get out of here. It says Raceland, she says, from a redraft standpoint, what's your approach to rookie wide receivers given their production tends to skew towards the back half of the season? I'm typically lower than market on rookie fantasy wide receivers in general, right? And that's come back to bite me when outlier scenarios like, Odell Beckham sticks out or whatever. But in the long run, I think people are more excited about rookie wide receivers than they should be. It's just a new thing. They're excited about guys after the draft. They knew them from college, et cetera, et cetera. More often than not, it turns out like Mecole Hardman, where they're blocked all year, or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, where they get a chance and they can't do anything, or Andy Isabella, who never makes an impact, or Marquise Brown, who only can show up, 3 games all year. And the list goes on, Dante Pettis.
Or even A.J. Brown, who... Yeah. Was such a stud, but wasn't even a full-time player until like week 9.
Right. So yeah, I think market's typically going to be higher than rookies. I will say though that maybe the case to do otherwise in this 2020 class is that this class is so special, so unique. In other words, there's like 5 to 8 wide receivers in this class that are so good and such elite prospects that they're more likely to be Odell Beckham style outliers in 2020 than normal. So that would be the argument against, but I think the market will reflect that, and a lot of these guys who go in the first round are going to come with expensive redraft tags, and we'll have to see on that. But yeah, generally speaking, Evan, what's your take on how to handle rookie wide receivers in redraft?
I think I have like almost the exact same take on rookie wide receivers, and going to be lower on. I think that there are special cases though where if they have a ton of projectable opportunity, then I'll definitely, bump them up and take a stand on them and take a positive stand on them for the most part, like, and you can look at the top 150, that's where I was comfortable putting these guys, and it projects to what, like in a 12-team draft, like, the 9th or 10th round, in terms of ranking the guys in the 120s where I had them. Like I guess that would be like the 10th round or something like that. I mean, I think that's usually where I start throwing darts on rookie wide receivers. But, with that said, like Amari Cooper, had him as like a 5th rounder. So there are going to be special cases where I think it's right to take a stand on rookie wide receivers.
And I think draft capital is going to play a lot into it. It just is what it is. Teams that invest more draft capital, i.e. a top 10 pick or a top 5 pick in the entire draft, obviously that guy is going to have more opportunities than someone who goes in the 3rd round. In the last couple of years, we really haven't had, I don't think we've had a wide receiver go in like the top 20 in either of the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Marquise Brown was the first wide receiver taken in 2019, and DJ Moore, the first wide receiver taken in 2018. This year, almost certainly there will be multiple wide receivers taken in the top 20. So from a draft capital perspective, we'll have to see on that. And guys who teams invest more draft capital, and they're just more likely to get chances early in their career. Okay. We've said it all in the combine. We'll be back next week with another podcast. In the meantime, go to establishedrun.com, check out the XFL, check out the free agency, check out the dynasty rankings, check out Evan's first top 150 of the 2020 season. So for Evan, for Jerry, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.